Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Fertilization in plants. In my previous video we have learned about pollination. Pollination is just the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of flower. Now we will study what happens after pollination. First take a look on a pollen grains looks like. Pollen grain is a double-walled cell. The outer layer is called exine. The inner layer is called intine. It has two nucleus, generative nucleus or the male nucleus and the tube nucleus. Ovule. It is the inner part of the ovary. Ovule develops into seed and ovary develops into the fruit. Each ovule has protective covering called as outer and inner integuments. You can see in the picture the inner integument and the outer integument. Integuments have small opening at one end called micropyle, which is for the entry of pollen tube. Enclosed by integument is a mass of food-laden cells called nucellus. You can see in the picture the position of micropyle and nucellus. Inside the nucleus is the embryo sac. This is the picture of embryo sac. It has 7 cells, 3 cells at the micropylar end, which 1 egg cell and 2 synergids. Three cells at the opposite ends called antipodal cells. And 1 large cell in the center containing 2 polar nuclei. Germination of pollen grain. Pollen grain on falling on stigma is stimulated to germinate due to the secretion of sugars by stigma. The picture shows how the pollen tube germinates. Through a point in exine, a pollen tube emerges out, carrying at its tip the generative and the tube nucleus. Generative nucleus divides into 2 sperm nuclei. Thus, germinating pollen tube has 3 nuclei, 2 sperm nuclei and 1 tube nuclei. The picture shows how the pollen tube enters through micropyle into the embryo sac. The pollen tube elongates and reaches the ovary through micropyle into the embryo sac. Inside the embryo sac, the pollen tube releases its nuclei. 1 sperm cell fuses with the 1 egg cell and forms a zygote. You can see the zygote in the picture. This process is called fertilization. The second sperm cell fuses with the two polar nuclei which are present in the central cell and forms endosperm nucleus. This process of fusion of three cells is called as triple fertilization. The picture shows how the pollen tube enters through micropyle into the embryo sac, and one sperm cell fuses with the egg cell to form zygote, and another sperm cell fuses with the polar nuclei to form the endosperm. Together, the fertilization and triple fertilization is known as double fertilization. Fate of floral parts after fertilization. Ovary becomes the fruit, ovule becomes the seed, ovary wall becomes the fruit wall or pericarp. Outer integument becomes testa, inner integument become tegmen. Together they form the seed coat. Secondary nucleus becomes endosperm. Egg cell and synergids becomes the embryo, and antipodal cells are disorganized.
Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe, like, comment and share.